Welcome to Negotiation with Alice, your negotiation podcast. Everything that you do where you need to get on the same page with someone else is a negotiation. So whether you have to negotiate a contract with someone, or you simply need your boss to sign off on that program that you'd like to implement, or you want to figure out how to rebalance the chore structure in your home, or talk about what vacation you want to go on. All of these things are negotiations. So in my podcast, we go over both personal and professional conversations, which all are considered negotiation, and I will give you tips on how to come out ahead. Welcome to the show. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Negotiation with Alice. Today, I have Alex Holt with us. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Alice. Nice to be here.
And Alex, I would love for you to introduce yourself to my listeners and let them know what it is that you do, but also who do you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wear a few different hats. Mainly, I work as a coach, facilitator, and then also as a nonprofit consultant. I have my backgrounds in education, nonprofit, and workforce development, and corporate social responsibility. And in 2023, I started my own coaching practice and now do that full time. And I primarily work with individuals and teams that are navigating change, usually around work, and supporting people to develop the inner resources to navigate external changes and shifts that are coming their way.
Wonderful. And where are you located, Alex?
I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island. You're in the Bay Area. Is that right?
I am. Yeah. And then are you able to work with people across the country? Do you prefer more local clients?
Oh, yeah. Most of the work I do, the one-on-one coaching work I do is on Zoom. And so I actually mainly work with people from all over. Some of the nonprofit consulting work I do has been mainly more local.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So today, Alex is interested in talking about basically something that we all hear about, but I feel like, there's more nuances about, and it's all about listening. And listening is really critical to negotiation because you, as a good listener, can pick up nuances that you may not pick up if you're not listening so well. And while everyone knows the phrase active listening, I think there's like even deeper levels of listening. So Alex, I would love to hear your take on listening and how that impacts negotiations.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. Well, yeah, and I think it's fun to obviously it's a very broad and big topic, listening, but and I would imagine from your world of negotiations, I feel like the position you're in really matters. So your role really matters. So like if I'm in a parenting moment, I may be listening as a parent, right? And my listening may even be different as a parent of a 5-year-old versus the parent of a 12-year-old. And I think that same concept, that principle applies usually in my work to the workplace, where a lot of times we listen from sort of a default mechanism or listening to just one or two things, and kind of slowing down to first listen more internally can broaden out kind of what we're hearing externally from another person. I'm happy to fill that in with more examples, but
yeah,
I'll start there.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit about the listening to yourself piece of it, and I'm curious if this has to do with listening in terms of your own identity in the relationship with the person that you're negotiating with.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking identity-wise, but certainly that, yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. And, as I was mentioning to you, I've been, as I continue deepening my own understanding, as I've been working, particularly in one-on-one contexts with clients, I've been studying a method called something called focusing, which was created by someone named Eugene Gendlin back in 1950s. And he actually was studying psychotherapy and found that sort of dishearteningly that the best outcomes in therapy could be determined by the first session somebody had, by how the patient showed up and whether they were able to be with ambiguity Like whether they're able to say, oh, I'm not quite sure what I'm feeling right now, and take the time to find it, versus other people who would just launch into a story or have a pre-established narrative tended to have worse outcomes. That's my condensed version of that. And so his whole work became, can we train therapists and other people to develop an ability to hold a space where you can cultivate more of that listening to what's happening internally before launching into the habitual way of responding. So that I was sort of pointing more in that direction of being able to, like find ways to find ways to listen from the present moment rather than listening from a past habit or a pattern or a tendency that we have.
So would you say, like, when you say ambiguity and being more comfortable with ambiguity, would that also translate to like uncertainty, meaning I might not necessarily know myself, or the thing that I thought was certain might not be as certain as I thought it to be? I'm trying to really understand what that means when you say ambiguity.
Yeah. I think what I what I mean there, I think there's two levels of it. One is being able to be okay with not quite knowing what I'm feeling now in this moment, right? So I walk in, maybe I'll ground it in an example. I walk in to lead my first board meeting as an executive director of a nonprofit. And, maybe I can identify like, oh, I'm nervous. But there's a lot of times we just stop there. And then we have a whole coping mechanism, say, okay, I'm nervous, I better be super prepared, and I better make sure I've covered this, and I better make sure I've done all this kind of thing. And rather than a listening, say, oh, I'm nervous, and so let me allow that to be here, and then sure, of course, do my preparation and make sure I'm prepared. But be able to allow for sort of a little bit more of that unknown inside of relational spaces. And a lot of times I think it gives more space for other people. Like that's what I found in my own experience when I work with clients, is that sometimes we're so pressured to like, okay, we have to like put answers into an unknown space rather than allowing for a little bit more of an unknown space or that ambiguity to surface a little bit more of a natural answer, or allow for new possibilities to arise in the moment.
So it sounds like then that not only is there like, being able to sit with a little bit more uncertainty, it also sounds like presence, right? That you just need to be present with whatever is coming up for you, whether that's anxiety, whether that's nervousness. So instead of trying to overcompensate to get rid of that feeling or to push it down, just to be present with it, or maybe even acknowledge it, right? Like, okay, I'm nervous, and it's okay that I'm nervous. Is that sort of like?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's right. I think you're hitting it there. And I think one of the distinctions I really like is the three phases of acknowledging, saying hello to, and then welcoming. And I think there's a lot in the culture now around like, oh, just be present. Like we have to welcome, be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And, I think one of the best teachings that I've heard is that sometimes being present, like acknowledging, can be a lot just to acknowledge. And sometimes we're not even able to maybe be present, especially if it's a challenging situation. So we do have to like skillfully maybe cut off. So there's a certain part of presence that maybe there is in certain contexts, the way to being present to 50% of what's happening is fully what you can do in that moment. And you try to grow into 70, 80, 90%.
I feel like a lot of times emotions are like small children, in that if you don't acknowledge them, they just get louder and louder and more, they act out more. Would you say that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. Do you have kids? Are you?
I do.
Yeah.
They're grown. They're 18 and 21
okay.
now.
Yes. Yeah, parenting and kids, it's sort of like a great metaphor to translate to all relationships, right? Those core relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So back to the listening. So the focusing. So the
Yeah.
focusing about being present in the moment and also focusing on what is happening to me. Is that sort of like the initial stages of the focus?
Yeah, and I think what's kind of interesting, what I've found is that the emotion is kind of one layer of it, but usually I think sometimes we get trapped in just the emotion. So we can say like, oh, I'm oh wow, someone insulted me and I'm pissed right now. You can feel the anger coming, or I'm scared, I'm anxious about a situation. Um, and a lot of times it's just the tip of the iceberg. So obviously if you're in a situation and you're anxious, you may need to use something to handle that in the moment with other people, especially if you're in a negotiation, right, for your topic, or I'm leading a conversation with people on my team. It might not be the time to really sort through what's really happening. But as a debrief, a lot of times that anger or that anxiety is also it's not just the emotion that's happening. There's also a bunch of other um, like pieces of information that are there, that I think as we learn, like I feel like as people learn to practice, this idea in the meditation of like on the mat, or in yoga, on the mat, off the mat, like you can kind of go to your sitting meditation practice and sort of sort through, oh, it's not just anger, there's also a certain physical sensation that arises. And actually there's certain memories that tend to arise, and there might be even some images that tend to come in. So all these things are happening. And then when I'm in the moment, if I can actually listen, back to the topic of listening, if I can hear these, I start to be familiar with the pattern structure. And then I feel like that's where the real agency or freedom and release comes, is that you can start, in my experience and people I've worked with, you can start to see the pattern forming like upstream, right? So you're not in the moment and I'm anxious or scared or angry. I'm like, oh, I can see it an hour before it's happening and start to kind of intervene. And I feel like that's really where it becomes very effective and practical out in the world.
So then, let me see if I can connect the dots. So basically,
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
yeah. So if you're listening to yourself, let's just say that includes listening to your body and what it's telling you, right? The signals that are coming, and you're saying that certain emotions are going to be felt in certain parts of your body because emotions are held in different parts of the body. And for example, for my listeners, sometimes anger might be clenching of the jaw. It could be your temples start to throb. It could be that you feel your chest is tightening or your stomach is hurting, like all of these things. And so then you're saying to listen to that, and then maybe to like try to understand like where that's coming from. Is that right? Like I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting it correctly. That
Yeah. And I would say specifically what, like the question of what, rather than, I think the default can often be why. Oh,
okay.
I'm in this moment and this is happening. Oh, why is this happening? And rather than just kind of like what is actually happening, slowing down moment by moment. Oh, first my palms get sweaty, then I start to clench my fist, then I notice it in my throat, right? Like kind of noticing the progression, the what, moment by moment.
And then explain a little bit more how we can avert it upstream, right? How we can avert it before it all starts to happen. Do we just catch the very beginning and say, okay, here's the pattern. I'm starting to notice my throat is getting tight, and then understanding what that pattern that follows through, like sort of when you were talking about preventing it from happening earlier on. Can you explain sort of how we as listeners to our own bodies can like divert something negative happening to us before it becomes too entrenched?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think there's a couple distinctions here. Like one is I'm not talking about like severe, like capital T trauma kinds of emotion, right? Because there's certain kinds of emotional experience or embodied experience that really should be treated and so you don't want to be re-traumatizing yourself by being like, okay, I'm going to understand my pattern. And now you're like swimming in the muck too much. So, and I think what really helpful thing is to start with easy ones. Like you could even start with positive emotions, start with joy, start with the things where you're like, oh, wow, that was amazing. Like what happened? What was the lead up? And what did I do an hour before? What was the build up to that pattern? So I think the most fundamental upstream thing is, I mean, it's cliche, but those things around like taking care of our, I don't love the word self-care, but this idea of just taking care of the body and the mind, and little hygiene things like how we go to sleep and how we wake up, and like putting the ground in place and like operating from this place of goodness, especially for people who have a tougher inner critic thing where it's like, oh, you get caught in the emotion. I think the first practice is to find a way to tap into goodness, period. Like find some ways where you say, okay, I guess it's called growth mindset today. Like whatever I'm experiencing, I'm learning from. So if I'm feeling anger or I'm caught in this emotion, the upstream thing, oftentimes we actually can't stop that. We have to like go take a nap, go exercise, right? Like I'm too downstream in the pattern to try to do analysis now. It's the wrong time to try to understand the pattern. This is a time to say, stop, exercise, sleep, eat something healthy. And then tomorrow morning I wake up and I say, okay, now I can look at it a little bit clearer. So I think that's really important is when you do that. And also this other part is doing it with somebody is really helpful. Like it's very hard I think it's possible, but especially the world we live in with, AI and all these things where just like, okay, what do I do here? Wow, I know exactly what to do. But knowing what to do and doing it are sort of can be a world apart. And sometimes, obviously, we need the knowledge, but sometimes the knowledge can actually be a hindrance because we know what to do, but it's actually we can't do it. And so we need like human being, and we need like a resonance with somebody else to kind of process through the harder parts of that.
So let's go back again. So then once we listen to sort of our inner selves and what our needs are and what's really happening. So talk a little bit about how that improves our ability to listen to someone else.
Yeah, that's great. Right. Because then, I think what it does, or I'll use two examples. I'll use one example of like working in the workplace with colleagues. I think it enables us, like one thing I've used that can be really helpful is to be able, if we're aware of where we are and we're kind of like resourcing ourselves, then I think it gives a little more space to be able to see other people for their good qualities and what they're trying to do. And then we can listen to people with a little bit more maybe compassion, or a little bit more, someone makes the same mistake and we don't jump on them. If they're, like let's say it's someone who has a project and they're doing something for you and they make a mistake, instead of reacting and jumping on them, maybe there's a moment of pause and a moment of support, and that actual mistake gets fixed long term. Like long term, it actually gets resolved rather than this kind of dynamic of reactivity. So I think it gives us the ability, the listening to ourselves gives us that ability to respond rather than react. And I think that has a big impact on the people we're with.
Would you also call it like the ability to give someone more grace?
Yeah, I think that's a great saying for sure. Yeah. And it starts because you're giving grace to yourself, right? I mean, I think that Pema Chodron has a really great, wonderful like definition of compassion around like the compassion having to start with compassion for yourself first. And that you have to know your own brokenness. You have to know your own pain. You have to know your own patterns where you get trapped, and have compassion for yourself in those. And then it's like, if you've practiced that with yourself, you say, oh yeah, we're all doing there's a lot going on in the world, like we're doing the best we can. It doesn't excuse bad behavior. It doesn't mean that we accept what's unacceptable. It doesn't mean, oh, now I have compassion, and so I'm going to let, racism or xenophobia or anti-Semitism or all these things. It means, no, I can have a little bit of grace, as you're saying, and I can respond more skillfully.
Yeah, I think that's right because, they always say that you hate in other people the very thing that you have that you're trying to get rid of, right? So if
Yeah.
you kind of see someone and they have a quality that that you're working on yourself, and it's mirrored back, typically people have a very like negative reaction to whatever they see that someone else is doing if they themselves possess that quality. So, in giving yourself more grace, it allows you to also not be as reactive to the other person because you're not having that initial, like, oh, this person is always late. And that's something that I'm working on myself. And it's like making me crazy, right? Is to be able to just lower that emotional, like, reactivity that comes up upon initial, like, meeting of this thing, the scenario that's happening or that's unfolding.
Right. If you spot it, you got it.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Alex. I would love to know, how can people get in touch with you? We'll have Alex's information in all of our show notes. But if there's like one piece of like whether it's an email or website address, how can people find you?
Yeah, I have a website at alexrobertholt.com. And that's my main website. And then I have a Substack too called Crossing Over, where I write and have a image, usually a short piece and an influence around navigating change.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Alex. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Negotiation with Alice. Until next time.